How's it going, everybody? This is BeatTheBush. Today I'm going to show you how to install this Fortress Power Hybrid Inverter battery system. Disclaimer here, before undertaking trying to install your own hybrid inverter, you're working next to high voltage lines, and if you're not careful, it could result in electrocution and possibly death. If you are unsure of what you're doing, it's best to hire an electrician. This DIY video is only meant for informational purposes only. You can go and buy the inverter, the battery, and then hire an electrician to do it for you. This right here is the NV12KW, which means it can output up to 12,000 watts at 240 volts. Each one of these batteries back here is called the eForce 9.6 kilowatt hour. So two of them around 20 kilowatt hour. It has a base that comes with it and also a thing called an E-way where you can route all the wires. Before even getting to this point, I took around 2 months doing all the planning, trying to figure out where things go, how to wire everything. And I came to realize that the manual will tell you how to bolt it all to the wall and stuff. But that is the easy part, I think. The hard part is to try to get everything to code so that you don't invalidate your homeowner's insurance. As a homeowner, you're allowed to work on your own electrical stuff in your own home. You can't actually go to another person's home and render services. When you do that, you need an electrician's license to become an electrician and to be able to render services for other people in other homes, therefore installing this stuff. You need to take an electrician's test, and even before they let you take that test, you need around 2,000 hours of apprenticeship. So I'm not going that way. I'm just gonna install myself, make a YouTube video and show you guys how I did it. My intention for this install is to make everything to code. So after I do all of this, which will involve mounting these to the studs, doing conduit work, adding a very beefy manual transfer station and also a sub panel. Here's a manual transfer station, a really big honking lever over here. In case anything fails, I can switch the lever and everything will go back to grid power. All of this can be offline, I don't care, and it'll just be like original. Now I talked with the people at Fortress Power, and the only reason you would need one of these, which is quite expensive, is that if the relay inside the NV fail. How often does a relay fail? Sometimes it does. And I actually looked in here. You can't easily replace a relay. You can't just kind of pull it out and then plug a new one in, thereby having like spares around or something. So if you're really handy with DIY, and even if you don't have power for a while, you can, have backup power elsewhere. Like I have a lot of battery backup. You can probably live without installing a manual transfer station. I think this thing itself is like $200, but if you want all the conduit work going around it, I think it'll add up to be like more than $500 just in cost alone. Plus there's all this wiring and all that stuff that you have to do. Here's my plan, lots of squibbles. You can zoom in on it if you want. There are a lot of requirements such as spacing above the inverter, spacing around the batteries. At first I thought you want to mount the display at eye level. So if you do that, you have to mount the inverter on either side of this battery tower thing because this is too tall by the time you stack everything. That's actually not a very good idea because you would have extra conduit work to do. I ended up cutting my shelf up there. I used to have a shelf right here. So I went through all this trouble to remove that so that I can stack a large battery tower right here and then put the inverter on top. And of course, you have to install all these on studs. You can either hang it on a wall, or what I'm going to do is just place it on the floor over here. And you still have to screw it onto the wall to just sort of brace it in case there's earthquakes and then it won't fall forward. And when I was talking about all the planning, right, I wanted to make sure the studs are exactly where I want them to be. So I cut out little holes here. Even though I had the stud finder, I wasn't quite sure because behind this wall, there were 2 studs in parallel. And studs are typically located 16 inches apart. But 16 inches later over here is actually between the 2 studs. So if I drilled right at 16 inches, it wouldn't have worked. Over here, I removed some drywall in order to figure out where the wires are going. I plan to make my main panel the sub panel, and the new panel that I'm buying will be the main panel over here. So you got the mains coming in down, and then I can just kind of route it over one and then come down over here to the main panel, and then the manual transfer station can go over here. This is about 121 pounds. Each of these batteries are 250 pounds, and this little base thing, it's not that heavy, and the E-way, it's not that heavy. They recommend you to have at least 2 people to lift the battery up onto itself so that you make a tower. But I'm gonna try to do it myself with a hoist instead. We'll see how that goes. So with that said, let's start mounting the battery. This is the base. We flip it over. Attach the feet. There's a bolt at the bottom and a nut that holds this in place. But we have this alternate nut that we're gonna screw all the way down. Once we attach it to the base, we screw this back up in order to tighten it. So for these 4 corners, you screw them in all the way. Now we tilt it on the side and mount these braces with these screws onto these holes over here. These holes are meant to be attached to studs. The center of these holes is 16 inches apart, and each of the holes are about 1 inch wide. So just based on my situation, it's better I hit the center of this stud and then try to hit this first stud rather than the outside stud. I've marked the center of the stud over here and over here. Put this base right down. If I put the bolt right on the inner part of this bracket, I can hit the center of the other stud with the inner part of this bracket as well. But if I try to shift it this way, I can hit the outer part of this bracket, but I can't hit the center of the outer stud with this bracket. So it's better I go over here like this. Now let's level this. I need to come up a little bit on this side. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. A little bit more. I have it leveled left and right, forward and back on both the left side and right side. So now we go at the bottom here and tighten those nuts. I've tightened them, double check that it's leveled again on the left side, on the right side. They give you this cardboard template and there are these positions that says wall or floor fitted. So I'm using floor fitted holes here, 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 and here and here. There are also some holes for NV12K that I'm gonna use later. These brackets is for the base. Once you have another battery on, you need 2 more brackets for the first battery. You put another battery on, you got 2 more brackets for the second battery. And then on top of that, you put the E-way, which does not require any brackets. And every time you put on another component, there's a spot to bind them together with a steel plate. This is on both sides every single time you have something else stacked on top of another. It comes with 2 types of screws to mount it to the wall. One for wood, like the studs I'm mounting right now. I use this one. Or you can use an expansion screw that's made for concrete or brick. The minor diameter of the M8 screws is 5.85 millimeters. Turns out the 1564 inch drill bit works well, which is about 5.88 millimeters. I did a test hole on a piece of 2x4. It seems to work fairly well. So now we're ready to begin drilling. Remove the base and drill the holes. Drill the holes for the first battery. Move the base back. I just got this impact drill. You really do need the impact type because it's so hard to screw these in. These are so large. This is in there really good. Let me put it on its side. Here's a connector, and when you look down on this, it's just all steel. Put these brackets on before you lift the battery and put it over there. Screw it in tight. Towards the back, there's a status light and then air exhaust valve. When this thing is engaged and on, this light will turn on, but it's facing towards the back. It's not completely against the wall because there's this bracket over here. The light will shine onto the wall and you can see that it's on. Put a piece of wood here so it just doesn't fall right down right away. There you go. Now we secure this battery to the wall. I'm going to try to lift this up myself. I'm going to use leverage. I saved a lot of electrical engineering books. You lift up one side, kick the book underneath, and you keep on doing this. There, I lifted up 1 inch. Rinse and repeat. Almost forgot to put in the brackets in the back. Let me do that first. There are more than 1 hole in the back, so I want to double check these brackets are 16 inches apart. Yep. And from the edge is correct. Otherwise, I don't want to lift it all up there to find out that it's in the wrong spot. Don't do this. This is crazy. 250 pound falling on people is no joke. Now I've got both edges somewhat close to the top edge over here, not on top of the pin, because I found out when I put the bottom one on, I can sort of rest the entire battery on the flat surface first and then lift it onto the pin. So like half of it can be on the flat surface. That looks very unstable, but I think I can lift this onto the surface. Yep, it's sitting on the surface now. Once most of it is on, we're gold. Now this looks unstable, But now I have a grip on this. I can hold on to this. I need to patch those holes first. So I fixed the holes, they've dried. Now I can move this back. Sometimes you need a crowbar to slowly let things down. The holes look like they're lining up, so I can put those screws in. Ear protection because this thing is really loud. I covered up the access port just to keep it clean, and you just put it right on top. Right there. Look at that, it's certainly taking up a lot less room than before when I had it stacked on the floor. We still need to connect them together with the plates here, 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 and on both sides, so 6 of them. I'll just show you guys one of them, but it's the same for all of them. Put it on top, there's about 1/8 of an inch play, up and down and left and right. So the batteries or the E-way can sit as they please, and you can still screw these in. I wouldn't use the impact wrench on these, you just hand tighten them is good enough. The E-way is a nice wiring box so that you can have conduits come out of the left, the right, or the top. This depends on how you configure your system. It's meant to make your life a lot easier because let's say there's only one set of holes, the conduit needs to come out that way, and then maybe it needs to come back around and go over here, making your conduit work a lot harder. So I've chosen to put the hybrid inverter on top. This makes things so much easier. You just go straight in. So let me open this thing up. There's a display right here. It's kind of like a car where you lift this up, put this little piece over here, twist it to lock it in place. All right, there's a display board for the battery level. Internet looking thing over here that has a cable that goes to the outside. Because this is a metal box, it needs an antenna on the outside. And there's also an accessory packet over here. Over here are these giant bus bars, the positive and negative. These batteries are going to this bus bar already, so it's being used, but it can also connect to 3 other things. To the inverter, meaning you have 2 bolts left to connect 2 other sets of batteries. So if you have like another 2 towers, you can come in from the side of this E-way and then go in right there. So later on, if you want to upgrade and just double your system capacity, it becomes really easy to do. You just set another one there, go in through these holes on the side. There's an e-stop on the side and it's completely off right now. So I'm gonna turn on my voltmeter and touch these 2 points here and you'll see 0 volts, right? However, if I turn it on, it doesn't turn on right away. Do some handshaking, make sure everything is fine before it connects the battery. Each one of these batteries actually have their own relay, and it's gonna turn each one of them on one at a time individually. It takes about a minute, so let's wait for that. Right there, it clicked once, 49.3 volts, and then another one click right after that. So it's on. The LED is right behind there, so we can see a green glow on the wall. Same thing for the bottom one. And if I sneak my camera in there, yeah, we can see the light is shining onto the wall. That's a nice sanity check to see that there's voltage on the battery. Now we can just turn it off. Right there, everything clicks and it goes to 0 volts. Now we can just close it back up for now. This locking mechanism has a triangle key. So if I turn it this way, it closes, and then I gotta push it in there. At least for this particular unit, I have a little trouble closing it. The gaskets are on pretty tough, so you gotta push it quite a bit all along here in order to close it. Now from behind the E-way, I was supposed to mark these holes before I put the E-way on, but we can still do it just fine. The topmost bracket, I have that cardboard sitting right on top there. It's snug. Now we marked the holes for the NV12K. There are 6 holes, 4 for the mounting brackets up here, and 2 on the side to hold it in place. And I want to double check the height of these holes with what I see in the inverter just to make sure, you know, it's approximately correct at least. So right now it's supposed to look like this. One right here, and then you put screws into the NV. One right here, put 2 screws in the NV. But there's no 2x4s behind there. I removed the drywall, installed these 2x4 cross beams using these strong tie Z-Max called FB24Z. They hold the 2x4 on each side. And I actually have to bend these tabs open to fit that 2x4 in there and then bend them back. There are 2 nails that holds on to the vertical 2x4s. 1 nail from above, 1 nail from below, and 1 nail from the side. So 5 nails total for these. I patched it up with the same piece of drywall that I removed. Crumbled a little bit more over here, so I had to patch it up a little bit. But it looks pretty good. Almost looks like nothing happened here. Drill 6 holes for the inverter. Now I'll mount the bracket on there. You put the hybrid inverter on top of the E-way. You don't actually need all these holes here. So there's a plate that you can remove off of the E-way and a plate that you can remove off of the hybrid inverter. And after you open them both up, you stack them on top of each other. All the cables can go through this rectangular hole. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 nuts over here to remove. Remove the top piece. On top of the E-way, it does not say what cables go through which hole. This is the plate. It corresponds with all the holes that's on the hybrid inverter. Each of these holes is meant for you to connect a conduit to it. There's COM1, COM2, the solar, the battery cables, the generator cables, the load cables, and the grid cables. These are really huge and they can be for 2-inch conduits. Each of them, of course, you can remove them, and it's sealed with a grommet, but you can reduce the size of these holes a little bit with a washer. This one is to reduce a 1.5-inch hole to 1.25 inch. So just by a little bit. So now I need to remove this plate from the hybrid inverter. Remove the plate. Notice in the hybrid inverter, there are holes on the bottom, there are holes in the back, and holes on the side. You shouldn't be crossing the wires inside. Now remove this panel. For the inverter, you should remove the grommet as well. I tested it. I can lift this a little bit, but it's heavy and there's no real good place to grip it. These little handles on the side, it's really meant for 2 people to handle it. I'm gonna use a method that I use to lift my hot water heater up about this high, which is to use these boxes. You tilt one of them, you put it under. Don't try this at home. There you go. Now it's gone up by, I don't know, 8 inches or so. And then we want to go up another 8 inches. So let's go that way. Like that. And then, like that. And for the final level, and kind of rotate it. I'll now set this on its back. I actually have a hoist on order that's coming. I was thinking of attaching those to the 2x4s higher up and then hoisting this up there. This is certainly something you can do if you don't have all these boxes or this sit-stand desk. I actually removed the 2 legs and put this table here so that I can use it as like a lifting platform. Look at that. I think it won't go all the way up. It's missing a few inches, but it's pretty close. Notice that I face the desk this way, the short side here, because it's right underneath the legs. I'll just move this a little bit closer. And then I like using these cardboard things because then it sort of slides around on top. Now I'm gonna lift it onto the little bracket in the back. For liability's sake, I cannot recommend to do this yourself. Find someone else to help you. I think the lock right here is gonna catch, so I'm gonna have to get off of this table. Those hole positions looks pretty good. This looks like it's right snug up against it. Now attach this hold down bracket there and also put in the screw. There's another bracket on the other side, but I'm not gonna record that because the camera's not gonna fit very well. I've added these cross beams here, 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 and here. This one had some electrical wire, so I had to do a cutout over here. And this one over here has a medicine cabinet because the bathroom's on the other side. So I had to shave this 2x4 down a little bit and then turn it vertical. Of course, when I put the screw in, I can only go as deep as 2 inches now. When I do end up putting this panel up here, I intended to have the main service go in through the middle hole. However, if I have it mounted to this stud, I have to do a cutout over here. So I changed my mind on that because it's more secure to use these studs without cutting into it. I'm gonna have the service go out of the drywall and into the top of this main panel here. This is a Eaton manual transfer switch, and inside it you'll see 3 holes, 1, 2, 3, and that corresponds to this, and this. So before I put these beams up, of course, I'm trying to figure out where the holes is supposed to go. After I put the drywall back, I still need to know where they are. So I kind of marked it on the side over here. I put the drywall back on. I have these mounted and the conduit bodies attached to these boxes. I still need 1 more conduit body there and 1 more on the hybrid inverter itself. After that, then we're ready to actually add the conduit in here. This is my first time installing conduit. I probably made some mistakes along the way, but I'm quite proud of this whole setup. All of this you see behind me is 1 1/4 inch EMT conduit. At first I thought about bending those myself so I don't have to buy these 90-degree elbows and connectors. I actually had a 1 1/4 inch conduit bender, but I was stepping on it and it wouldn't bend at all, so I had to return that thing. I also got a hydraulic pipe bender. It turns out it was for rigid conduit. When I put EMT in it, it didn't fit very well and it actually kinked all these tubing, so that didn't work. I had to return that. So I gave up on bending my own conduit. I just bought the 90-degree stuff and the connectors. I'm using these conduit bodies here. Depending on if it's a left turn, right turn, or into the wall, they call them different things. Into the wall, it's called LB. Going from the short side after it makes a right turn, it's called an LR. This one, after it goes in, it makes a left turn, it's called an LL. And then they have like a T-shaped one or just a straight one, they call them different things. These conduit bodies have a little plate. You can remove them so that you can pull the wires easier. At the end of these, they are MPT threads. These guys that are screwed in here, it's called a conduit hub. These guys are called set screw connectors, and you can just kind of insert the 90-degree elbow in and turn these set screws and tighten them in. These guys typically uses MPS, which are straight threads, so there's an incompatibility here, except that this entire setup that I'm doing, it's not meant to be watertight. This is indoors, inside a garage. I'm choosing EMT because I don't need it to be that strong. It just needs to protect the wires. And if you go to Home Depot and you compare the prices of EMT, the next more rigid one is IMC, and then you go to full rigid, which are thicker and thicker materials. They get more and more expensive and harder to assemble into this shape. It's already hard enough for me to cut these shorter straight pieces to connect them. So I just bought a 10-foot section of this 1 1/4 inch conduit. Use this thing, cut it straight through, deburr it afterwards with a file so that it doesn't have sharp edges and cut your wires. So doing each piece easily took me 10-15 minutes. Assemble this piece by piece until you get from one end to the other. The way I progressed through this is I did this short piece first. It turns out the 90-degree angle here was a little bit too long and it was running into this. So I just cut off like 1.5 inches or so to make it a little bit shorter. It still works. And then I put this one here. This 90-degree angle I did not cut at all. Put the connector here, put another 90-degree, and measured from the edge of this 90-degree elbow to where I need it to be over here. So that's the length of this piece over here. And because I know I need a little bit of room to attach these to the wall with these connector pieces, this pipe up here is gonna need a little bit of room. So I can't actually run the conduit directly next to this one. There needs to be some space. So based on that, I measured out this piece and cut that. And then when it came up here, I did the same thing, put two 90 degrees together, measured from here all the way to here, which needs to go a certain depth in to reach this hole over here. So, you know, as you do it, you just kind of measure it out, make sure everything's level, and then just keep on adding pieces to it until you're done. There is one additional thing behind these LB bodies. There's like a chase nipple over here. It's just like a little piece. So the wires, when you run through it, won't touch all those threads and potentially cut them. I got most of this stuff at Home Depot, except the conduit bodies for the LL and LR is like nowhere to be found at Home Depot. So I had to get it at Ace. It was quite expensive, like 30 bucks or so for each of them. And I also needed a 1.5 inch to 1 1/4 inch reducer because the holes they provide on the NV or the E-Way, they don't provide all different kinds of sizes. So whichever conduit size you need, maybe it would match, maybe not. But the hole over here is 1.5 inch. So I had to reduce it a little bit with a reducing washer, and I got that at Ace Hardware. Later on, I went to Platt electrical supply, and they do have these LL and LR conduit bodies for slightly cheaper, like $26 each or so. So if I knew that, I would have got them. I already installed them, so I'm like, okay, whatever, just leave them in there. Yeah, I have a lot of drywall that's already back in place. I had to put these on in order to mount this box and this box. You'll notice some of the drywall, it's not up yet because my main panel is still live right now. And in a way, this is actually a sub panel. There is another panel outside my house where there are two really large breakers, one 90 amp and one like 30 amp or something. The 90 amp one runs to here, so I can go out there, turn it off, and this will all be powered down, and then I can remove this main wire, come out of that hole and go into this panel over here. This will be my new panel. So the power comes in, it's gonna go to this breaker, go back up this pipe up here and into the NV. So if the NV ever needs to charge the batteries, it can, or if the battery drains low enough, it can switch to grid power and sort of do like a pass through if it needs to. From here, there is the load output, right? And that comes out of this conduit over here into this manual transfer switch. This manual transfer switch, if you open it up, it switches this output between this or this, which is from the hybrid inverter. So if I go down, the hybrid inverter will power the house, so I don't have to move all these wires that are connected to the house. And then I spent quite a bit of money on all this conduit, all this wiring and stuff, so that if this ever fails, or maybe if I need to take it offline to add more batteries or for whatever reason, I can just go like this, off, and then push it up. And all of a sudden, the main is coming from here. It's going through this 90 amp breaker, going through here, right? And then all the way back to my main. So if I put it in this position, it is in grid power again. Nothing is changed and all is fine and good. So then I went to Platt Electric Supply. Here are the wires I got from there. I don't know how heavy these are, but each color, it's about $100. They charging me about $260 something per foot. 2-gauge THNN wire. THNN is like a very temperature resistant wire, and you run these through the conduit up there. So I got line 1, which is typically black, line 2, which is typically red, neutral, which is typically white. These are all 2-gauge, by the way, and then I have a 6-gauge ground that is green. This is a bit cheaper, of course. So before I decided I needed a 1 1/4 inch, I wanted to run this at full power. For 2-gauge wire, you can run up to 100 amps, so 240 volts, you can run up to 24 kilowatts. And then because you have 3 2-gauge wire and a 6-gauge wire, you have to make sure the fill is low enough for this type of conduit. The whole purpose with having a low fill rate is so that you can pull the wires through. Otherwise, if it's really, really packed, you can't push the wires through. It just doesn't work. I calculated something like 60% fill ratio. It'll fit. 1 1/4 inch. But this thing can actually supply power from the battery, and it can pass through a bunch of AC energy from the grid at the same time and push it all out on the load. So it can actually go more than 24 kilowatts. I'm not prepared for that. I think the highest I've ever run the entire house is around 20 kilowatts. So 2-gauge wire would work just fine for this particular house. The breaker that feeds this main panel is actually 90 amps even. So there's just not enough power in this house to do that. Now let me try to pull some wires and hook all this thing up. Trying to get away with not buying a wire puller. So I'm gonna feed this wire, just one single one through first. Kind of goes pretty smoothly. Open this up. It comes out to that end. So I have line 1 in there all the way through, line 2, neutral, ground, and also the networking wire. These are the ones that are gonna monitor how much power it's drawing from the grid. So let's see if that can go in there. Most you can push through is through 2 90-degree bends. Generally, it's supposed to be less than 360 degrees, but man, this stuff is like wrestling a snake. It's heavy duty and it's really hard to bend. So by the time it got to this third 90 degree, I couldn't push it anymore on this side. So I had to resort to opening it up a little bit because these are held in by set screws so I can access them. And now I have them in pieces and I can sort of thread them through the rest of the way. Pulling the wires actually took a while. If you look at these posts, they're only about 15 millimeters deep. The Envy is sort of expecting really huge cables like 3/0, 4/0. The load and grid is 2/0 to 3/0 because it's expecting to use around 200 amps. So these posts are extra big. It's around 22 millimeters deep, so you can't use the regular 15 millimeter ferrules for these posts. I actually ended up using 4-gauge ferrules on my 2-gauge wire because they fit better. To show you the length difference, 15 millimeter, 25 millimeter. First, I'm gonna do one of these for the 25 millimeter 2-gauge wires. I need it to be about that long, and I have this Nipix cable stripper thing. Push this, open it up. There's a little blade in there that lets you wrap it all the way around, kind of eyeball it, and then you spin it around a few times. Then we put on the ferrule, the flared end towards the insulation, and it looks like I need a little bit more. Now we'll try it again. Now it's pretty flush. I'm using this cable crimper and I'll have to crimp it multiple times to get it there. It doesn't look the best. I think I could have used a 4-gauge ferrule that's 25 millimeter, but that's what I have. Black is for line 1, 25 millimeter. I shove it all the way in and I only see 3 millimeters left. So it really needs to be that deep. And I'm just gonna tighten it by hand for now. All these screws need to be torqued, and not just torqued one time. You have to torque it, wait a day, let the metal relax, and it might get a little loose, and then you gotta retorque it the next day just for safety reasons. I was installing other batteries where I torqued them all right, and then months later I check it out, it was kind of loose and it was getting warm. So you really do have to check them 2 times. Now we'll do a 15 millimeter one. Put this over, and I like to remeasure it when it's on there. That's about right. Spin it around 10 times. Take it off. I don't cut it all the way because I don't want to nick the copper underneath. Then put the ferrule on. It's a pretty snug fit because I'm using a 4-gauge. Because the strands are so thick, the diameter of the wire, it's almost like a solid wire. Crimp this one as well. I'll probably need 3 crimps. 1, each crimp is about 5 millimeters wide. 2, and 3. Sometimes I see these wires really nicely arranged in the main panel. I really want to do it like that as well. So I've made sure the wires are all very correct lengths and kind of dress them accordingly so that they look very nice. The red one is exactly 1 inch longer than the black one here. Just to tighten them for now to hold the wires in place, I'm going to torque everything at the end. Now I would install the rest of the cables. It's pretty much the same thing. Cut them to length. Add the ferrule, put them in. To connect the battery, I bought these 4/0 battery cables that are 2 foot long. Now it's only 2 foot long because I stacked the hybrid inverter directly on top of the battery. If I were to put the batteries side by side, the battery cables would be like maybe 6 foot long instead. And these things are expensive. These things cost about $10 a foot. So you want them as short as possible to reduce cost. For this system, you actually need a 5/16 hole on one side, and the other side, you need a ferrule. So I'm gonna have to cut this off, put some of these on. And of course, in order to crimp this, you need a special crimper. This thing actually costs more than the cables, 60 bucks, around 20 something. So if you're able to do it, I would find a custom cable maker. First, let's remove the heat shrink. And this cutter is probably not enough. I have a hard time cutting 2-gauge wires with this already, but these are stranded, so it might be easier. I would buy a better cable cutter, but I really want to do this today using some pipes to increase my leverage. On the carpet might work a little bit better. Maybe if I sit on it. Oh yeah, there we go. I think I can cut another one pretty easily then. And then sit on it again like before. Now we'll put the ferrule on. This is a 4/0 ferrule, but it looks like a little big. We might be able to fit a 3/0 ferrule on top of this 4/0 cable. Remove the insulation. See if the ferrule fits. This is the 3/0 ferrule. Fits very nicely, except maybe it needs to go in a little bit further. I've removed a little bit more. Try to get every single wire in there. Even though it's a 4/0 cable, the ferrule is 3/0, and then this outer crimp is a 2/0 crimper, but it looks like it's gonna fit just right. Close the hydraulic. I'm making sure it's snug, And now we close it. Last chance, double check everything, close it. And then we turn this knob to open it back up. Looks like we need to crimp 2 more times to fully cover this ferrule. Here you go, second time, open it up, and the third time. And here is our crimp. Looks pretty good to me. Here's my final cable with it trimmed. Here's the other one, and they run about 25 millimeters deep, which is how long they need to be to go in the inverter. So I did as much as I can so I can leave most of the house connected to the grid still. The wire is mostly done except for changing the mains. I gotta turn that off and then switch it over to this new main panel. Then I have to connect this last connection from the manual transfer switch to the sub panel, which used to be the main panel, and then I can power it back on. So now let me connect the battery cables. The battery's off, but I always like to just double check it just to make sure. Check the DC voltage here. There is no voltage, and just check the AC voltage. No voltage. Within each battery, there's a relay, so it's completely cut off right now, so that now it's safe to work on. Connect the red cable first. This is bridge inside, so it doesn't really matter which one you connect to. The red one goes to positive. Unfortunately, these flanges on the outside is a little bit too wide for that hole, squeezing them in first. This is 25 centimeters to like right here. If I push it all the way in, there's a little bit is left over. Tighten that. Now we're connecting this. I think I'll leave it a little angled up like that. Temporarily tighten them for now. Put the negative side in. Black for negative. I'm taking the service line, this right here, this big fat one, and making a hole right there so that the service line can go a little further down and then come back down. Now the service line has like a little loopy loop right there that can give it maybe like 8 more inches. Because the wire is coming from that way for some reason, even though my meter is from that way, I think it's kind of like running through the roof or something and then coming back for some reason. But it's going down that way about 16 inches or so. By the time it gets here, I'm gonna have to use that extra length of 8 inches in the service line. And then it should connect with this just fine. It should have just enough wire to get there. So the main service line will go through a hole I'm gonna make there, come through this LB, come down here and connect to everything. So let me make that hole up there now. I have this newspaper to catch all the debris. I just don't have a big hole saw, so I gotta do it by hand. This is my service panel and there's a lock right here. It's not locked. Just push this in, and the top over here is to keep liquid from going inside the panel. So you're supposed to just kind of pull it down like that, and then you can just open the door like this. Lift this piece to unlock it, and I'm just gonna open this panel up so we can see what's underneath. This right here is supposed to go to my dryer. This right here goes to the main panel in the garage. So you see it's 90 amps. If I flip this off, then it goes to 0. Dryer's not using anything, so I can flip that off. And if I pull it, we see that the top and bottom is line 1 and the center is line 2. I finished wiring everything with the exception of the solar panel wires because it needs to go through the walls. This is a 2-story house. It might have to go through the roof and then tunnel through the walls from the attic down to 2nd floor and then down to 1st floor in the garage over here. So it's a pretty involved process. I might just have to run the wires temporarily through the house first, just temporarily, just to make sure everything works first. I rerouted the service wire that used to go into my main panel, that one going in here, and it turns out the ground wire is a little bit shorter than I wanted to. So I had to move this ground bracket from down here up a little bit in order to just get it to fit. I had some concern that maybe the temperature rating of the CT wire cable is not as high as the THHN cable over here. But in the end, I decided to route it through the same conduit. I could try to change it a bit later, I think. Let's follow along. If the manual transfer switch is switched upwards and it's powered from the grid power goes in, it goes through the circuit breaker, it goes through this conduit up there, and it exits through this conduit on the left. It goes here, goes up, and then goes to the main panel. So now everything is grid powered. The other connection here is to charge the hybrid inverter. So it goes up over there into this guy over here. So all the connections are accounted for in this new main panel. We have the 2 4-aught battery connection that's going from here up there. There's a ground cable connected from this box to here. That's just to ground the battery enclosure to ground. The grid power goes in through here into the grid L1, L2 over here. The load comes back out and out into this second conduit over here and into the manual transfer switch. Every single connection needs to be torqued, and I'm just using one of these torque wrenches over here, non-insulated, so I have to be extra careful. Let me show you guys how this is done in one of the connections. For the NV, there's a little label over here that'll tell you how much to torque it to. The load and grid expects a 2/0 to 3/0 cable. I'm only using a 2-gauge cable, so I'm not going to be torquing it that much, but we do see a 1 to 2 gauge needs to be torqued to about 15 Newton meters. I had to specially buy this because I didn't have a 5/16 inch hex driver, so I'm extending it first, attach it to the torque wrench so that it's long enough, and set it to 133. That's 125, 130, 133 right there. For my torque wrench, I need to tighten this on the bottom so that it doesn't slip when I'm holding this handle. Double checking that the battery is off. There's still 11 volts here. Now we turn this until it clicks, just as an example. Right there, that's 133 inch-pound of force. And when I did it by hand, it's really hard to tell how much you've twisted. You think you twisted very tight, but actually after you torque it, it wants maybe like half a turn more. So you gotta do it for here, neutral, the earth ground, even these bolts on the battery cables, the ground nut over here. This manual transfer switch has 3 hex nuts for each incoming connection, so 9 total, so all of those need to be torqued. This panel over here says each of the lug nuts need to be torqued to 100 pounds inch. The service wires coming in here has 3 lug nuts that are flathead. Those also need to be torqued. There's a label on the side that will tell you how much to torque it based on how thick the wires are. These are 2-gauge wires. It says to torque it to 50 pound inches, and you also have the wires that goes out of these 2 breakers. The nuts in the breakers need to be torqued. The nuts in this neutral line need to be torqued, and also all the ground wires need to be torqued. On the old main panel, but now it's the sub panel, the power lines coming in also has these hex lug nuts that needs to be torqued, and there you have it. You have to torque all of them. The reason it's so important is because if you do not torque them, it doesn't hold it tight enough. There's a little bit of higher resistance, so if you put it under the extreme load that it's supposed to handle, it would get hotter quicker, and it's not good to get hot just because you didn't tighten it enough. When you have a thermal camera, you can run all of this under the highest load it can sustain and see what's getting hot, and sometimes you might notice that, hey, you know, like that breaker is getting hot or that screw is getting hot. Then when you power everything off, try to retighten them, you find out that it's kind of loose. So this is just to make sure, you know, things don't heat up just for no reason. After everything is torqued, I can start turning everything on just to test. There's an e-stop over here. If I turn this on, it will initiate a startup process. These battery terminals are not normally connected. So after some time, it will turn this guy on. Right here, the battery icon is on, and let me test the voltage on here. So we have 49.1 volts. This entire battery system is a 15 cell LFP, 9.6 kilowatt hours, 19.2 kilowatt hour total capacity because I have 2 of them. Now that that's on, there is this little white box here, which is the Guardian. There's a little antenna cable that goes towards the back, and it requires Wi-Fi. First thing we want to do is update the firmware. I'm going to go to Fortress Power. I already registered for an account. When you connect to the Bluetooth of this thing, you can give it your Wi-Fi credentials, and then it can connect to the cloud. So you can look at the status even when you're not at home. I can look at the products that I have right here. 29% state of charge. I've left it on a little bit so it consumed a little bit. Even when it's sitting there, it's consuming about 15 watts each. This is just self-drain power. I'm gonna go to the lower right firmware, and we see that the current version is 1.0.2. We need to update the firmware first, so I'm gonna select install, and it's gonna take a while, so let me come back. Now I'm upgraded to the latest version, 2.2.8. This took about half an hour to download and update on its own. I have 29% battery power right now. The NV, the hybrid inverter, is not turned on. This is just the battery on its own. We still need to install the Wi-Fi module into the NV, so this has its own Wi-Fi connection too. Just plug it into the side and put the 4 screws in. The LCD over here can also be updated. We saw it's version 18. machine. So I'm just gonna turn the thing off first. You need to have a less than 16 gigabyte flash drive and a allocation size of less than 4 kilobytes. Usually with embedded electronics, it's more picky about this because it doesn't have a lot of processing power, a lot of software in order to be as versatile as possible, let's say. So you need to use your own flash drive. Go on their website, on the upper right corner, select support, and then down in firmware. And then you select NV, and then they'll show you the firmware download section. So now that it's off, I'm going to plug this in, one of the USB ports over here, and then I'm gonna turn it back on. My inverter has version 18, which is the most updated version already. But they do have version 20, which supports 400 and 600 amp panels. 11.6 of it is going towards the car charger, the EV charger. So it's not going through the NV. I'm using about 25 amps or 6 kilowatts to charge the battery. I'm pulling about 17 kilowatts from the grid, around 75 amps. It's been about 20-30 minutes or so, 92 degrees. And coming out of this breaker is about 48 amps, 25 amps out of this one to charge a hybrid inverter. The 48 is going towards the car charger, and that goes through the manual transfer switch and into the sub panel. And this one is the one that's doing 48 amps, 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The cable actually is getting quite warm, around 106 degrees. The plug is the same. It's actually pushing at its maximum that's rated for this EV charger. So it's 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside the manual transfer switch, nothing fishy going on. 85 degrees maximum. All the connections are pretty cool. Actually cooler than the wires themselves. So this is a very good thing. Inside the NV, the relays is 109 degrees Fahrenheit within tolerance. The battery cables are only 86, so that's really good. 4-aught gauge, so they're remaining pretty cool. And inside the battery E-way thing, the battery cables are remaining pretty reasonable temperature. The Guardian thing, 97, and the bus bars are pretty cool, 83 degrees or so. This has been an extremely long video. It took many months to record and make. I still have a few things to do here. I need to cover up those electrical holes up there through the drywall with this thing called hardware cloth. It's not a cloth, it's actually wire, so rodents can't come in and out of there. Put the insulation in here, put the drywall back on, attach all the conduits to studs so they're not just flying in midair, including 3 brackets for the top, 1 bracket for this U-shaped one bracket for this elbow, and that should be secure enough for all these conduits. I also need to run a conduit from my yard to the attic, back down the 2nd floor, down the 1st floor into the garage here so that it can connect to the NV and charge the batteries. I did a battery charge test. I did a little bit of load testing and checked out that everything looks okay, nothing is loose. So I'm gonna leave the rest of that for a different video because this is a long enough video already. I do not claim that all of this is to code right now. After I'm done with all this, I still need to call an electrician to have them certify all this. I'm sure there are mistakes made. I'm also thinking right here, you can't have wires that's going from here to there. You might actually need an actual conduit that goes from the LB into the service panel and a bunch of other things too. If you guys are interested in the Fortress Power NV12K or the eForce 9.6 kilowatt hour, check out my affiliate link down in the video description below. I really hope this installation video helps you guys plan out your own installation. I saw some people install this with PVC conduit, and those things are actually not rated high enough temperature for the wires that's running through them. If you run it at maximum load for long enough, all those plastic conduit is just gonna melt right off. I also used a whole bunch of parts and tools that's not part of the main product over here, and I'll list them in the video description down below. A later video, I will tally up all the costs. There's a lot of little things here, including, you know, the cross beam 2x4 wood, the little brackets that holds the cross beams. You got this conduit hub, you got the LB, the wires inside, some specialized tools too. Thanks for watching this video. Until next time.